Now, remember I mentioned what we're talking about has been here from way back. Psychedelics were used in indigenous communities farther back than they could ever be. I will tell you how I came back to it personally is a friend of mine had brain cancer. She lived in Cape Cod. And she said to me, her social worker shared with her a book by Michael Pollan, who talked about, if you know Michael Pollan, he was written on food extensively, but he then had his own experience with psychedelics and wrote a book about it. And she said her social worker wanted her to do, I believe it was psilocybin, as part of her cancer treatment. And she was scared. I said, well, let me take a look at the book, Sue. And so I read the book and was reignited, because I'd kind of put it aside, because as you know, coming out of the Reagan era, you know, the war on drugs. And now, as you can see, we have medicinal marijuana in Pennsylvania and recreational in most of the other states in America. So the way we look at things changes. And what we're talking about here is looking at things in a radically different way, being able to be open to seeing things not made in the actual observable physical universe. And we've been kind of looking at that in circle in many different ways over the years. Well, on the note of a seed, that is a person from our community who has something to share. And today, Suzanne Vinay is going to be our spiritual seed. And what she's going to share is going to tie in with what our speaker is sharing about. As I shared before, I personally had experiences early on. And I also, we have a filmmaker here from Temple. And I too was in the Temple filmmaking program and had an opportunity to go to Peru to do on 2 different occasions to two different films. One was on an intentional community in Iquitos, and I also did my own piece on curanderos. Earlier, I had done a community in South Peru, and it was a movie entitled The Space Between, and that meant the space between the haves, the have-nots, etc. And that opened up the possibility that I could have an experience in Iquitos with ayahuasca, and there's a lot more to that story, but I'll just say that now. But Suzanne, who's going to share her seed, had never done any of this until, come tell your story.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Suzanne Vinay, the wife of that speaker, Suzanne Baxter. And I'm not Mrs. Baxter. I want to talk about psychedelics. The experience was lost on me when I was a young person, simply because, I don't know, I was a Catholic school girl, I didn't believe in drugs, whatever.
Goody two-shoes.
Goody two-shoes. So we were in South America together in 2018. And while we were there, we wound up meeting a curandero's daughter, and she wanted to guide us in a meditation using ayahuasca. So she did that, and I was given a little cup of 2 roots that tasted very bitter. I drank it, I sat there, I laid there, and suddenly the world opened up. I saw psychedelic shapes, geometric shapes, colors, dimensions, and then I heard that I should probably not drink alcohol because it would stop and inhibit my life expanding. And then out of the right side, I saw a figure come to me. And I looked at this figure and I thought to myself, grandmother. But she didn't look like my grandmother, the one I knew. She was the grandmother that died at 33 years old in 1933. And she said to me, I have been with you since the day you were born. That was a sacred moment for me. That opened up my whole world. The experience shaped everything that has happened since. And I have become a little more open to psychedelics. I had another experience with psychedelics that I was outside, and my friend and I, who were trying to get back to the house because we were getting a little unsteady, we got up from our seat and we looked at the ground, and everywhere around us was this honeycomb grid of light, like lacy light. And I looked at her and I said, "Do you see that?" And she said, "Yes." I thought, this is amazing, that this is something we can do given our mind's eye is opened. So I did make notes just so I would intend to remember everything. So basically, I just wanted to share that I had the most beautiful experience for a person who really was goody two shoes and did nothing, and opened my mind, opened my heart, and opened me to the possibilities that are way beyond anything I could know. So thank you, and I welcome our speaker. And this is my grandmother, by the way.
Well, wait a minute, I'll just introduce our speaker a little bit more. Our speaker today is Teresa Hancock, excuse me. I knew a Teresa Hancock. Teresa Hancock, and the way we met is we met on Alignable. Alignable, is that what it's called? Well, I am on that, but I never use it. I'm not social media real savvy. I'm not trying to get more work. I have more work than I can possibly deal with now. But somehow, when I saw on there and she mentioned the American Psychedelic Society, and she was, and also the, I think, Philadelphia Psychedelic Society, I said, I'm going to send a little note out to this person. And over time, we connected. And it turns out she lives 10 minutes from me. And so we met. And then it was, we decided, wow, maybe you'd like to be, because I've wanted to share this psychedelic experience more here at Circle, but not knowing that folks here are really wanting to know about this. But anyway, here it is. And Teresa is going to come up and tell her story. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm Teresa Hancock. I'm actually originally from a very small town in Montana. So it's called Eureka. It's right up in the northwest corner of Montana. So I moved to Philadelphia when I was 19. I did not grow up with any type of spiritual background at all. And I didn't believe, but I didn't know. And I'm the type of person that if I don't experience something, I don't believe it. And throughout the journey of my life, I started working in corporate America, and I got really, really sick. I was having a spiritual awakening, but didn't realize that's what was happening, because at that time, plant medicines really weren't a big thing. It wasn't as big as it is now. You know, right now we're having the largest spiritual awakening that we've ever had. And, you know, I'm really lucky to get to be a part of that. So I ended up being in corporate America for about 13 years. And as my spiritual awakening was happening and I got really sick, I tried everything. I went to a therapist. She basically told me I was crazy because I was seeing how everything was an illusion, but none of it was real. I'm like, this, and when you're very programmed in that system, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, this is all a lie. I didn't handle it very well, let's put it that way. And I became very, very sick, to the point where I couldn't get out of bed, and I was ready to end my own life. It got to that point. And after a failed attempt, I started really, really realizing I had to do something. So I did what everybody else would do. I went online and I started searching for some help. I found this little tiny piece of an article that said that in the Silicon Valley, some people that were microdosing, that it helped with their depression. So at this point, you know, again, I was barely getting out of bed. So I tried microdosing. And microdosing made it so I could get out of bed. I was able to start functioning somewhat. I was still very unwell. And then I saw a documentary, and in the documentary, it was about the Amazon jungle. There was a very, very small piece of it about ayahuasca. And at this time, things were much different here. You couldn't, now there's a million places for you to go and do psilocybin and ayahuasca. And we have like, I think close to 200 psychedelic societies. But at that time, that was not the case. There was no place in the US. So I ended up down in the Amazon jungle doing ayahuasca. And I think at this point, it might be a little bit helpful if I kind of explain how psychedelics work. With psilocybin and ayahuasca, they both work very similar. They're different medicines. Ayahuasca is much harder than psilocybin. I recommend psilocybin to most people, and that's what I use with my clients that I work with. And how they work is when you take a plant medicine, it goes inside of you and it raises your frequency. And it raises your frequency up. And when that happens, low vibrational emotions that you've been carrying around your whole life, like trauma from your past life, from generational trauma, your personal trauma of this life, collective trauma starts to come out. And when that happens, this is why people say, oh, I had a bad trip. No, they didn't have a bad trip. That's really, doesn't really exist. What happened is you weren't with a shamanic practitioner that was able to help you release that energy that no longer served you, because that's what it does. And you have to emotionally process that energy. So it doesn't just dissipate and disappear on its own. You have to feel it to heal it. That's how plant medicines work. That's why plant medicines are a little bit more challenging to work with, because you have to do your shadow work. But it also leads you down a path of ascension, because that's really what the ascension process is. And I've experienced ascension a couple of years ago. I can go a little more into detail about that. But when you're taking plant medicines in particular, they're different from synthetics. And I think that's something that we need to make sure people understand. Not that synthetics are helpful, they can be very helpful. But synthetics do not remove the trauma and help you emotionally process it, and they don't have an organic spirit. The organic spirit is key. The organic spirit connects you to the spirit world. So that's how we develop back into our spirituality. And as you go through this process of working with these plants and you start releasing low vibrational emotions, you then are able to become your true self again, because it leads you through a path of soul journeying. I don't know if anybody's heard of soul journeying, but there's a book out there on it. It's really good. Basically what soul journeying is, it's where you retrieve pieces of your soul that you've lost from various different forms of trauma. And the trauma could be something that you don't even know, because it's generational. You can inherit, it's called epigenetics. You can inherit trauma from your ancestors. And I guarantee all of us have it, because if you haven't done this real deep inner work, chances are you have it, because our ancestors were no longer doing that. Once we moved from being an indigenous culture and practicing and using these medicines, we kind of lost that way of life. And then it just really built up and built up. And that's why the world seems so crazy right now, because a lot of that is actually coming up, because we're having this awakening. And in order for us to have the awakening that we're having, all of that trauma has got to be processed. And plant medicines are fantastic for helping you process that trauma. And they teach you along the way. So if I also was told not to drink, same type of message. I've received numerous messages throughout my journey. I've done plant medicines, I'm guessing between ayahuasca, psilocybin, and bufo, probably about 100 times. I stopped counting a few years ago. So I've received numerous messages, and that was a very important one. Another one was that I was being brainwashed, stop watching TV. But so that's just a little bit about how psychedelics work. So it's kind of hard to understand my story if you don't understand how they function within in your system. But I ended up down in the jungle doing ayahuasca, and I ended up, it was very, very challenging. I'm going to start by saying that this process can be very difficult. So if it's something that you're ever considering, you really need to understand what you're getting yourself into. And I was so sick that I didn't care. It was so bad that I was throwing up night after night after night doing ayahuasca, and it didn't even matter to me because I was getting better every time, but it's slow. Plant medicines work slow. Sure, they do things very quickly. The first time I did ayahuasca, I was, no longer wanting to be on this earth. And within 20 minutes, I died. I experienced, I had what we call ego death. But it's really not ego death. Your ego never dies. It just changes. So within the 20 minutes of taking it, that immediately happened. Yes, it was extremely terrifying. And then I got really, really sick. But then I got to meet a spirit, so that's kind of the thing with plant medicine. If something challenging happens, usually something really amazing happens. I've met multiple spirits. Yes, I've experienced dying 3 times. But when that happens, a version of you is dying. You're not actually dying, it's a version of you. So when I came back from that experience, I was no longer suicidal, and I was no longer drinking. I couldn't drink Jack Daniels at all. I was drinking way too much in my life. Could not, I would smell it and it would just make me sick. It was done. So it took care of 2 very challenging problems that I had at that time. And like I said, that's happened to me about 3 times. And I've experienced source energy 5 times. So that's also a very, very amazing experience. Twice on ayahuasca and 3 times on Bufo, which is very different. Source energy is the most amazing. It's really, it's a color, it's a light, it's a ball of energy. And there's no color like it anywhere that I've ever seen but there. And it's just pure love and joy, and it's where we come from, right? And I got to experience that in a couple of different ways. On ayahuasca, it's a much different than on Bufo because ayahuasca is in duality. So with ayahuasca and psilocybin, I'm here, you're there, right? In Bufo, there's none of that. Your ego is completely gone and you're completely inside of source. So it's a much different experience. It's pretty amazing on Bufo. But again, on Bufo, before you can get to that point, you really need to do your shadow work because some people can't get there without doing their shadow work because you have too much low vibrational energies within you to get into that space. With ayahuasca, it's a bit different. Very, very rare to be able to access it on ayahuasca, but for some reason it happened to me right at the beginning twice. It was to heal me because right after it happened, I came back here and started the psychedelic facilitator program through the Philadelphia Psychedelic Society. So I immediately started helping people in my community because what we had was a situation where people couldn't find facilitators. People were really needing help and they were wanting to do high dose sessions on their own. So I created a website and a program, and that ended up turning into my career, which I did not plan. It was not part of the 5-year plan, but that's what happened. But anyway, back to source. So source energy, like I said, I've experienced that 5 times. And I experienced ascension, as I referred to earlier, a few times. Now, with all of the experiences that I've had, and I obviously can't go into all of the amazing detail of each one, but what happened during that process was I was taken through basically experiencing truths, because that's what plant medicines do. They show you truths. And my truth was that I had a severe abandonment issue, and the plants showed me that, and they healed it. And once the abandonment was gone, I actually remember the moment and felt the moment and know when it left my body. And I could feel it literally come out of me. My shaman was singing to me and he sung it out. Once that was gone, I came back to my life and realized that I had been surrounded by narcissists my whole life that were just destroying my life. And I couldn't see it because I was born into it. It was just something that I thought was normal. So, I lost my boyfriend, my best friend, literally tons of people in my life at that, most of my family. So, yeah, that wasn't really an unfortunate thing. But it helped me see that. It was not easy to see that. So something to understand about these medicines is you have to be able to be open to seeing whatever it's trying to show you and to making the changes in your life. If it gives you a message and you don't do it, I ended up in the hospital once because I did not listen to the medicine. And so it's very important that if it says do this or don't do that, that you do it. After my abandonment issue, then the next thing that it taught me was that I was addicted to suffering. And I had no idea, and I do what's called a plant dieta. And plant dietas are where you diet a specific plant. So basically you go to the jungle for a month, you're in isolation, you're doing ayahuasca like 4 times a week. And on the 4th week of these dietas, you're exhausted. It's brutally hard. But every single time I get some major piece of information. I got that I was surrounded by narcissists, and then I got that I was in suffering and I was addicted to it. And that I really, I was just destroying my life as well. So I was able to finally see that because I could not see it. And now I look back and I think, how did I possibly not see this, coming, but I didn't see it. So those 2 things, once I was able to integrate those into my life and remove the individuals and the things that were causing my suffering and, causing me to be miserable, was really, really challenging. So it takes time. Plant medicine, again, it works slowly. But a couple of months ago, I'm going to say about 6 months ago, I had amazing experience. I was doing a dieta and I experienced what we call animism. And for those of you that don't know what animism is, it is where everything has consciousness. So, and spirit. And I'd heard of this from indigenous cultures, that this was, possibly something that was true. I don't believe things unless I see it. So it led me to believing in animism, and I didn't even know animism was an actual belief or, type of system. It just started playing on YouTube about a couple weeks ago. And I was like, oh, that's what happened. Basically, everything came to life. I could feel all these spirits around me. And it was like, welcome home, you're back. It was like I'd been gone on this long trip and I had been back. But the walls, the bed, everything in the room had consciousness and was alive and was spirit. And I could feel it. I was directly connected with it. So that's how plant medicine's really where it brought me to my spirituality. I mean, I didn't have any form of religion, like I said before, at all, until I started using plant medicines. And it's kind of hard not to when you're using plant medicines, because that's what they do. They lead you back to your true self. They lead you to your spirit. Of course, they put you through some work. You have to get yourself out of suffering. I call it the walk out of suffering, because as you're doing plant medicine, when you're emotionally processing the suffering that you have within you, whatever it might be for everyone, you're walking your way out of suffering and you're ascending at the same time. So it's a process of exiting suffering, we'll call it, and the process of ascension. Okay. So psilocybin, okay, well, there are different lineages. We can start with that. Psilocybin is the mushroom lineage. Ayahuasca is the plants. And bufo is the toad. So they do different things. Psilocybin and ayahuasca are for doing your shadow work. And bufo is for unity consciousness. So like I said, I was in it. I was source energy, right? And when you get down to psilocybin and ayahuasca, really the biggest difference between the two of those is So ayahuasca, the earth actually tells us this. If you look at where you can only find ayahuasca in the Amazon jungle. You can find mushrooms all over the planet. Ayahuasca is really meant for shamans. Because it used to be, before ayahuasca became an industry, that you would go down to the Amazon jungle and the shaman would take the ayahuasca and just sing the Icaros to you, right? So now that it's become an industry, it's being used in ways that it really should not. I personally don't work with people with it because most people can't handle it. They don't like it. Ayahuasca is the most challenging one out of all of them. Bufo is more powerful, but ayahuasca is way harder because you have a lot of purging. Ayahuasca is very difficult. As for psilocybin does the same thing as ayahuasca, but it's slower, right? Because with ayahuasca and you're doing all that purging, you're getting rid of all of your trauma, so you're ascending quickly. Psilocybin will do the same thing, it just does it more slowly. And it's a lot better for most people because ayahuasca can drastically change your life like that. It did mine. And I've seen it do it to other people. So, with psilocybin, they call it psilocybin the children. And it's a little bit, it's not as physically challenging, right? You don't get as sick. Not that you don't get sick on it, because you can. I have many times, but most people don't. And it's a little bit easier way to do your shadow work. With ayahuasca, you're traveling into deeper spaces and deeper dimensions that if you don't have the right energy body, you can get traumatized very easily. And a lot of people get traumatized on ayahuasca.
Is LSD close to one of these or same as?
No, LSD is different. So with Bufo, ayahuasca, and psilocybin, they're a traveling medicine where you're going internal and you're going somewhere else. That's how you heal yourself. LSD can be great medicine. It's great for learning. If you want to learn a language, have a hit of LSD and go and listen to it and do Duolingo, whatever it's called. And I've heard of people learning languages very quickly with it because it's mind-based, not heart-based. Plant medicines are heart-based.
I see.
Synthetics are more mind-based. That's why I say that plant medicines heal you in a different way because they help you heal the actual energy of the trauma that's stored.
I see.
That's where most synthetics, they're having you think about it, right? It's like a really good therapy. They can be very, very healing in their own way. They can be great for integration. Okay. So after you have a huge plant medicine experience, you can do something like MDMA. MDMA is really, really good for that. It's really good for, and I see a lot of people that actually use LSD for just enjoying life. Mm-hmm. I can't do it anymore. Once you've done a lot of plant medicine and you raise your frequency to a certain point, you really can't do synthetics because they're a lower vibration. So okay. I used to have great fun at music festivals with it though. So